Welcome. I'm Wesley Lowery, and tonight I'm joining Color of Change to talk about the historic nature of this inauguration, how black voters propelled Joe Biden to victory, and what black Americans should expect from the president and Congress, who they just helped get elected. We're going to take an honest look at the political situation we all face in this moment, just weeks after a white supremacist mob coordinated and successfully implemented a planned insurrection in our capital. And we're going to talk to the president of Color of Change, Rashed Robinson, about how you can get involved in the organization's mission to build power for black people. President Biden said, "Today we celebrate the cause of democracy, and the will of the people has been heeded." This election cycle, black people fought and organized in communities across the country to elect Joe Biden as president and Kamala Harris as vice president. It was a win powered by black voters and the infrastructure of racial justice organizations, who overcame both voter and ballot suppression strategies to ensure that the voices of black voters were heard. Not only did black voters turn out in record numbers, black communities and their leaders made racial justice a central issue in this campaign, motivating millions of people who might not have otherwise voted to head to the polls. Black Americans may not be the majority in this country, but for the first time in history, polling shows that racial justice is a majority idea. The power of black voters makes a difference in every election. And now, the question is, will they see a return on their investment? How will they use this momentum to drive progress? This election made history, with the ascension of the nation's first black, South Asian, and female vice president, Kamala Harris. Her election comes after more than a century of struggle for voting freedom for both women and black people in this country. President Biden said it himself. This victory isn't just about Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. It's also about hundreds of thousands of black women who have fought, organized, run for office, and voted in order for us to reach this moment. Black women like Charlotta Bass, the first black woman to run as a vice presidential candidate in 1952. Shirley Chisholm, the first black woman elected to Congress in 1968. Carol Mosley Braun, the first black woman to serve in the U.S. Senate in 1993. Karen Bass, the first black woman to serve as Speaker of any state legislature in 2008. Stacey Abrams, the black woman who became the first gubernatorial nominee for a major party in the U.S. and the first black woman to deliver the State of the Union response. Her historic efforts helped flip the Senate and turn Georgia blue. This is the third ticket in the last 4 election cycles to feature a black member, and the first to ever recognize the role of black women's leadership in driving America forward and fighting for our collective freedoms, even as black women face odds that are stacked against them. That makes this election a turning point for racial justice, with Kamala Harris as vice president, along with a growing force of black people being elected to Congress, like the recent win of Georgia Senator Raphael Warnock. Black Americans and racial justice organizations have been presented a new opportunity to push for racial justice at every level of society. What comes next is the opportunity to build a more just, equitable nation for black people and other marginalized communities. Let us not forget, the Biden-Harris election would not have been possible without black voters who fought and organized in communities across the country. And now, racial justice organizations like Color of Change insist that it's the time for the administration to prioritize black priorities. Black people in America face overlapping crises: an ongoing pandemic that's destroying lives and livelihoods, killings at the hands of police officers and a failure to hold those officers accountable, and torrents of hate, racism, misinformation that spread freely across social media, all of which put black people at risk every day. Civil rights groups have long argued that racial justice can't be segregated as an isolated issue or addressed with a single solution or task force. It must be embedded in every policy and every action. Earlier today, President Biden declared the dream of justice for all will be deferred no longer. To do so, his administration will have to dismantle policies and incentive structures that allow racial injustice to thrive. Color of Change and other justice groups are going to be pushing for just that. As the new administration takes office, here are 5 things that Color of Change says must be priorities for the Biden White House. The first is police accountability, holding departments, prosecutors, officers, jails, and prisons accountable for discriminatory and unlawful patterns and practices, and ultimately, the creation of a justice system that ensures Black people's safety. The second is a demand that companies and corporations go beyond the statement and correct the harm that their policies, practices, and business models cause to Black employees, families, and communities. The third is an equitable COVID-19 response with free, accessible, and safe vaccinations nationwide, as well as adequate federal relief programs for Black small businesses that have been decimated during the pandemic, to build an economy more supportive of Black people and Black businesses. The fourth are civil rights regulations to rein in the power of big tech companies and to prioritize making digital spaces more humane and equitable places for Black people. And the fifth is to change the rules of the media, both the written rules and the unwritten rules, so that Black people are no longer harmed. To talk about those priorities, I'm joined now by Rashed Robinson, president of Color of Change.
Rashed, thanks so much for joining me today. During his inauguration speech earlier today, President Biden said, "A cry for racial justice, some 400 years in the making, moves us, and that cry for racial justice for all will be a dream no longer deferred." How would you like to see Biden prioritizing racial justice in his administration, and what will it take for that dream to not be deferred any longer?
So, we've had a number of conversations with the Biden transition team and with new folks being nominated. And what we've been clear about a number of things is racial justice is not simply about undoing the policies of the past, but is about building the type of equity moving forward. That means that it just can't show up in speeches, but it has to show up in budgets in terms of what you are prioritizing and what you're deprioritizing. If you want a criminal justice system that actually has racial justice at its center, you can't spend all of your money prosecuting poor brown and Black folks while letting those that are sort of advancing corruption at a macro level that's hurting all of us off the hook. If we're talking about policies like economic recovery in the face of COVID, we need to make sure that as we're helping small businesses, Black and brown small businesses also get the type of recovery. And that means that if racial justice is at the center of that, you look at all of the ways in which you need to get those resources to communities and how it might have to look different. I've been talking about this a lot because I sometimes will hear people say, we need to get a true democracy so we can get racial justice. And what we understand very clearly at Color of Change is that the rules and the norms, the policies and the practices that have put us in harm's way are a result of racial injustice. So we do not get racial justice out of a true democracy. Racial justice actually gives us a true democracy. And it can be the sort of force, the sort of driver behind actually putting in policies and practices that help all of us. And so that's going to be really important. But in terms of, it means having targeted programs. It means dealing not just with the policies of the past, but moving us forward. And it means that recognizing that budgets are moral documents, and beyond anything that a politician might say, where our political leaders put their money, where political leaders put their resources will determine a lot about their values.
Now, Black voters made up the backbone of the coalition that put President Biden and Vice President Harris in office. What should that community now expect from them? We remember that the speech from President Biden where he's slamming the podium saying, I've got you guys, Black voters, you got me here and I've got your back. What should these voters expect from the Biden administration?
Well, we should absolutely expect policies that forcefully deal with the challenges that our communities are facing. whether it's the sort of impact of the coronavirus of our communities, both from a health perspective and an economic and education perspective, whether it's dealing with policing and mass incarceration or the job crisis that we see in this country. You know, inequality is not unfortunate like a car accident. It's been manufactured. It's a result of choices. And so part of what's going to happen is leaning into new choices and new decisions. If you can manufacture inequality, you can work to manufacture equality. And so what we're not looking for, though, is charity, right? We don't need water bottles to Flint. We need equitable tax policies to make sure that the pipes are clean and that people actually get clean water. We don't need service days at inner city schools. We actually need full funding of public education to ensure that our students and our kids have a fair chance. We don't need simply just having reentry programs. We need to deal with the fact that the United States has 4% of the world's population and 25% of the world's incarcerated population. What we're really talking about is not charity, but structural change. And racial justice, I believe, is going to be the driver to get there and the driver that will lift all boats.
Now, Rashed, how do you, Color of Change, and other racial justice groups, how do you hold the Biden administration accountable? Right? They've said they want to do many of these things, but how do you make sure they actually happen?
Well, you know, we've been really clear in our conversations that we want to work with this administration, but our responsibility is to be accountable to our 7+ million members, Black folks and allies of every race that want to move this country forward. And so we really do see our role as holding the line between real solutions and fake solutions, right? I don't need a whole bunch of bipartisan commissions if it doesn't actually lead to real change. More conversations about race and racial inequity that it doesn't include action is not a real solution. I don't need corporate engagement that enables corporations to hurt and harm us. Part of what we recognize is that we've got to be clear about our own power. You know, there have been times during past Democratic administrations where we didn't always push the way we needed to. We didn't always hold folks accountable at the levels we needed to as a movement. And part of what we're really focusing on is what does it mean to both work with an administration that professes to be on our side, has given us indications, got in power with our votes. How do we work with them while simultaneously know that there are going to be forces that stand in the way of change? And we have to work to remove those forces, but also work to push those in power to also go up against those forces. So whether it's recognizing that criminal justice reform will always hit the wall of police unions, will always hit the wall of corporate power, will always hit the wall of the right wing, that those who got in power off of the strength of our votes need to not just be buoyed by our push, not just to be buoyed by us, our uplift, but they need to have their own strength and their own push in that effort.
Before I let you go, where can people find out more about the work that you guys are doing, sign up, and get involved?
So they can visit colorofchange.org. It's the place to go for information, to sign up, to join, and get involved. Folks can also visit us on our social media channels, Color of Change across the many different channels, or me, Rashed Robinson, on Twitter. All of these are going to be places where you can go learn more about what we're doing, sign up and take action, and then get the folks in your friends, family, neighborhood network to get involved. Once we are sort of out of this virus, we won't just be online. We will be back in communities, in offline engagements through our squads. But whether we're online now and working virtually, or whether we'll be offline once we are sort of in a place to do that, our work, our ability to achieve real change is driven by the people who join us, the numbers of people who stand with us, and all of the ways in which we can target our energy collectively at the decision makers who need to be nervous about disappointing us and ready to do the things that help us achieve everything that we can achieve.
Rashed, thanks so much for joining me, and I'm really looking forward to see the work you and the other folks of Color of Change do for the upcoming 4 years.
Thanks, Wesley. Appreciate you.
Thank you for joining me tonight for an important conversation of the years ahead. Remember, we're more powerful when we work together. You can check out the campaigns discussed here at colorofchange.org. And if you have any issue you'd like to get support for, head over to organize4.org to launch your own campaign. I'm Wesley Lowery, and thank you for joining me for Color of Change's Inauguration Special.